time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
On a cold December morning in 1964, Mario Savio stood on the steps of Sproul Hall, urging students to take a stand against the repressive UC system. Savio led a movement born out of the political and social injustices of the era, bolstered by the unwavering desire to be heard. Students who took part in this movement did not do so as an act of intentionally blatant rebellion, but as a means of protesting a violation of their constitutional rights. In a time when conservative ideals were the norm, the American youth stepped out of the shadows of their ancestors, proposing new radical ideas in the Berkeley free speech movement, a stand that would prove to be a protest for all protests. In the midst of the Cold War and the Vietnam War, any political activity outside of the norm was considered subversive and was labeled as communist. Because of that, few students at the time were active in civil rights. However, the refusal to serve 4 African Americans at a lunch counter in North Carolina incited protests by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, to promote racial equality.
And it was like the key activist organization in the United States in the early 60s. And it was through SNCC and also the Congress of Racial Equality, another civil rights movement, that the student movement really began to take off and inspired students outside the South, including white students on predominantly a campus like Berkeley, to become politically active.
The nonviolent tactics and pursuit of equality at the heart of the civil rights movement formed the basis and inspiration for the FSM at Berkeley.
You will not understand the free speech movement if you fail to see that it's a continuation of the civil rights movement.
In 1964, Savio participated in the Mississippi Freedom Summer as a SNCC volunteer. The mentality he had upheld as a civil rights activist carried over to the free speech movement. Unfortunately, so did the unaccepting attitude of others. Public universities veered away from radical speakers and leftist professors for fear that funding would be cut. In accordance to a ban implemented in the 1930s, Section 3 of the Regents' policy prohibits the use of university facilities for the purpose of soliciting party membership or supporting particular candidates or propositions. In the 60s, the burgeoning civil rights movement took hold in the North, revolving around racial discrimination in hiring. Angered by the incessant student protests, store owners complained to conservative legislatures, pushing universities to further clamp down on campus activism. However, Berkeley students were permitted to protest on the Bancroft and Telegraph Strip, as it was not considered part of the university. This all changed when the Oakland Tribune, a conservative newspaper, discovered a copper plaque dictating that the area was actually campus property. On September 14, 1964, Dean Catherine Toll informed students that they were no longer permitted to use the Bancroft and Telegraph Strip for political advocacy. In response, 18 student groups banded together to form the United Front. However, once the students realized that negotiations with the deans would be ineffective, they persisted in setting up tables. When a few demonstrators were summoned to the dean's office, Mario Savio and Jack Weinberg led 500 students at a sit-in at Sproul Hall, demanding that they too be disciplined. The following day, Corps leader Jack Weinberg was detained by campus police. As a police car was brought in, Weinberg rallied a crowd of students who then surrounded the car for 32 hours. As thousands joined the crowd, Mario Savio mounted the police car to express the students' demands. His invigorating speech marked the birth of the free speech movement. He then led thousands in a sit-in at the dean's office at Sproul Hall to protest Weinberg's arrest. This magnitude of opposition to school administration was unprecedented. Their stand against campus authority represented the common goal of various groups, to secure their constitutional rights. As police forces flooded onto campus, Governor Pat Brown urged UC President Clark Kerr and Chancellor Edward Strong to negotiate with student representatives. Once the meeting concluded, Savio mounted the police car and stated the stipulations of the agreement, which included that the Campus Committee for Political Activity be created, Jack Weinberg be released, and student demonstrators engage only in university-approved protest. Despite the temporary agreement, there was no consensus on whether free speech transgressions should be punished by criminal law or by school administration. Nevertheless, those in the free speech movement continued to stand up for their rights. The free speech movement cannot just be considered a campus phenomenon. It enabled students to express their dissatisfaction with society's fundamental issues. Though power interests tried to contain the FSM through harassing trials and biased news reporting, the movement continued to grow more pervasive and to explore other fronts. Setting aside differences, students from across the political spectrum came together to support the free speech movement. Suddenly there is an issue. Everyone recognizes it. Everyone grabs at it. A feeling of solidarity develops among the students. Despite the controversy at the time, the FSM established the revision of university rules to permit political speech and organizing, but did not truly achieve free speech.
We got the university out of the business of restricting free speech, but we did not get free speech on Berkeley campus.
While students were granted the right to free political and social advocacy, the Regent's obstinacy incited the 6-year war at Berkeley. During this period, students were free to congregate, distribute information, and express opinions on campus. However, skirmishes involving tear gas and the state militia revealed that the Regent's policy did not do enough. In failing to grant free speech to non-students on campus, the school's response ultimately fell short of extinguishing the conflict. This shortcoming revealed that despite having made headlines across the nation, the FSM had far from eliminated opposition.
The people who opposed it were also motivated by all sorts of things. There were right-wing people who thought these were a bunch of left-wing nuts. There were faculty members who were very conservative, who thought, well, we don't want this to become a left-wing university. We don't want political university.
They thought the university should be a place for dispassionate inquiry and objective investigation, but political issues were filled with passion and inherently subjective. While the FSM was denounced by several groups across the country, it contributed to an integral part of American campus culture. The FSM was an important aspect of a rising counterculture that saw similar protests for increased student freedoms. The commonality among these movements was the desire to deviate from traditional America, reinforcing the idea that youth could bring about change by taking a stand against unfair authority.
It created a tradition where people felt that Berkeley is a place where you can come to protest injustice.
This notion would allow America to progress and to adopt a more versatile perspective towards tackling future issues. For example, the FSM set a precedence for organizations such as the Students for a Democratic Society to lead anti-war teach-ins and marches. As a prominent figure in the FSM, Savio had become nationally recognized as a symbol of revolt. This radicalism concerned FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who worried that it would incite rebellions nationwide. Consequently, he closely monitored Savio for years. The FBI's excessive surveillance of Savio indicates that at this time, movements like the free speech movement were rare and often viewed upon as aberrations of student behavior. But even in the face of national scrutiny, the FSM's very existence highlights the stand that Savio and his peers took against established rules, not for the sake of refuting authority, but for standing by what they believed in.
The right to free speech is not a left-wing or a right-wing cause, it's a human right.
That speech really showed students that they could become a moral voice. They could take a stand. Usually students don't have much power, right? But if they all band together on the path of a moral issue and do it in a way that's nonviolent and ethical, it can really inspire people.
This proactive attitude not only broadened the possibilities of free speech, but also paved the way for future student protests. Over 50 years later, the influences of the free speech movement are still palpable. In February of 2017, alt-right proponent Milo Yiannopoulos was set to give a speech at UC Berkeley. However, he was met with violent student protests. The consequent cancellation of his speech drew criticism that the left was intolerant of views outside of their own. This indicates that the ideas at debate during the FSM still persist today. Although it is now the left that is accused of restricting free speech, the same debate of where the line for free speech should be drawn remains. The importance of the FSM is hence undeniable. Understanding that what is considered acceptable free speech evolves with history's progression is crucial in maintaining a flexible mindset. On a smaller scale, the free speech movement was born out of desire for greater political expression. But on a national scale, the FSM represented a message to the youth, that abiding to existing laws and rules would not allow for progress. As Mario Savio articulated on the steps of Sproul Hall, in order for change to happen, one must take a stand.